It was a warm Friday evening, the kind that makes you feel alive and ready for anything. My girlfriend, Emily, and I had planned a date night that we hoped would be memorable. We decided to try a new restaurant on the outskirts of town, rumored to have amazing food and an even more amazing ambience. Little did we know, it would be a night we would never forget for all the wrong reasons. As we drove out of the city, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the countryside. The restaurant, Vieille Maison, was nestled in an old mansion surrounded by dense woods. It had a reputation for being charmingly rustic, but as we pulled into the gravel driveway, the place looked eerily deserted. There were no other cars in the lot. "I guess we beat the dinner rush," Emily said with a nervous laugh. We walked up the creaky steps to the front door and pushed it open. Inside, the atmosphere was indeed charming, with candlelit tables and the faint sound of classical music playing in the background. A tall, thin man in a black suit approached us. His smile was wide, but his eyes were cold and unblinking. "Good evening," he said in a voice that seemed to echo in the empty room. "Welcome to La Vieille Maison. Your table is ready." He led us to a small table by the window, overlooking the darkening forest. As we sat down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. There were no other patrons, and the air felt thick, almost suffocating. The waiter handed us menus, but before we could open them, he spoke again. "Tonight's special is a tasting menu. Chef's choice. I think you'll find it quite unforgettable." Emily and I exchanged glances but decided to go along with it. The first course arrived, a delicate dish of smoked salmon with an unfamiliar herb garnish. It tasted exquisite, but there was a strange aftertaste that lingered on my tongue. "Do you feel weird?" Emily whispered, her eyes darting around the room. "Yeah, a little," I admitted. "Maybe it's just the atmosphere." The next course was a rich, creamy soup that smelled like nothing I had ever encountered. As we ate, I began to notice shadows moving in the corners of the room, flickering in the candlelight. I tried to brush it off as my imagination, but Emily's grip on my hand told me she saw it too. By the time the third course arrived, a tender piece of meat with a dark, glossy sauce, we were both on edge. The shadows had grown more pronounced, and the music seemed to distort, becoming a low, menacing hum. I took a bite of the meat, and my vision blurred. Emily's face twisted in fear as she dropped her fork. "What's happening?" she gasped. I reached for her, but my hand passed through the air as if she were a mirage. The room began to spin, and the shadows coalesced into dark, faceless figures that surrounded our table. Their whispers filled my ears, a cacophony of unintelligible words that sent chills down my spine. I stood up, trying to pull Emily with me, but she was frozen in place, her eyes wide with terror. The waiter reappeared, his smile now a sinister grin. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" he asked, his voice dripping with malice. I screamed at him, demanding to know what was happening, but my words came out as a garbled mess. The shadows closed in, their cold hands reaching for us. Emily's scream echoed through the room, blending with my own as we were engulfed in darkness. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I awoke, I was lying on the floor of the restaurant, alone. The candles had burned out, and the room was in disarray. Tables and chairs were overturned, and the air was filled with the smell of decay. "Emily?" I called out, my voice hoarse. There was no answer. I stumbled to my feet and searched the room, but she was gone. The front door was ajar, and I ran outside, desperate to find her. The woods were silent, and the gravel driveway was empty. I drove back to town in a daze, my mind reeling from the night's events. I reported Emily missing, but there was no trace of her. The restaurant, too, seemed to vanish without a trace. No one had heard of La Vieille Maison, and the address I gave the police led to an abandoned lot. Weeks turned into months, and Emily was never found. I was left with haunting memories and the lingering fear that something beyond our understanding had taken her. To this day, I can't explain what happened that night, but I know one thing for certain. Some places are meant to be forgotten, and some nights are better left in the dark. Months turned into years, and the memories of that horrifying night at La Vieille Maison haunted my every waking moment. Emily's disappearance left a void that nothing could fill. I tried to move on, to bury myself in work and forget, but the shadows never let me be. Night after night, I would wake up in a cold sweat, hearing those whispers in the dark, feeling those cold, faceless figures closing in on me. One particularly stormy night, while rummaging through old boxes in my attic, I stumbled upon a photo of Emily and me. It was taken just a week before that fateful night. Tears welled up in my eyes, and as they blurred my vision, I noticed something odd in the background of the photo. It was a shadow, barely noticeable, but it sent a chill down my spine. It was the same kind of shadow that had haunted us at the restaurant. Determined to find answers, I decided to dig deeper. I took the photo to an old friend, Mark, who was a professional photographer. He analyzed it and confirmed my fears. The shadow was not a trick of the light or a photographic error. It was something else, something sinister. Mark, being a skeptic, suggested we investigate further. Together, we started researching the history of La Vieille Maison. We scoured old newspapers, town records, and even visited the local library's archives. It was then that we stumbled upon a chilling discovery. La Vieille Maison had been a notorious location in the early 1900s, known for strange disappearances and rumors of occult practices. The mansion had burned down in a mysterious fire, and the land had been abandoned ever since. We also found mentions of a secret society that conducted rituals aimed at communing with dark entities, using the mansion as their meeting place. According to the records, the society believed in sacrificing souls to gain immortality, and many people had gone missing during their reign of terror. Armed with this knowledge, Mark and I decided to visit the site of the old mansion. We drove to the outskirts of town and navigated through the dense woods until we reached the abandoned lot. The place was overgrown with weeds and trees, and there was an unsettling silence that seemed to swallow all sound. We set up camp and waited for nightfall. As darkness enveloped the woods, we began to hear faint whispers, just like the ones I had heard that night. The air grew cold, and shadows danced in the periphery of our vision. Mark, still skeptical but visibly unnerved, set up cameras and recording equipment, hoping to capture any evidence of the paranormal. Hours passed, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Suddenly, a gust of wind extinguished our lanterns, plunging us into complete darkness. In the pitch black, I felt a presence closing in just like before. I called out for Mark, but there was no response. Panic set in, and I fumbled for my flashlight, managing to turn it on just in time to see Mark being dragged into the shadows by unseen hands. I ran after him, my heart pounding in my chest. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing fleeting glimpses of the shadowy figures that seemed to multiply with every step. I found Mark on the ground, unconscious but alive. As I tried to drag him back to safety, a familiar voice echoed through the night. "Is everything to your satisfaction?" The sinister waiter from La Vieille Maison stepped out of the shadows, his grin more malevolent than ever. "Where is Emily?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fear and anger. The waiter's grin widened, and he pointed towards the heart of the old mansion's remains. "She awaits you," he said cryptically. Summoning every ounce of courage, I left Mark and headed towards the ruins. The whispers became deafening, and the shadows seemed to form a path, guiding me. In the center of the lot, where the mansion's main hall once stood, I found a small, decrepit altar. On it lay an old, weathered book with symbols I couldn't understand. As I approached, the shadows coalesced into a single, dark figure. It spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "She is trapped between worlds, a sacrifice unfinished. Complete the ritual, and she may be freed." Desperate to save Emily, I opened the book and followed the instructions, chanting the incantations written in its pages. The air crackled with energy, and the shadows swirled around me. With a final, agonizing scream, the shadows dissipated, and the figure vanished. I collapsed to the ground, exhausted and terrified. As dawn broke, I heard a soft voice call my name. I turned to see Emily, standing at the edge of the lot, looking as confused and scared as I felt. We ran to each other, embracing tightly, tears streaming down our faces. We made our way back to town, never looking back. The lot where La Vieille Maison once stood was now silent, the whispers and shadows gone. Mark recovered, though he had no memory of what happened after he was dragged into the darkness. Emily and I tried to move on with our lives, but the experience left an indelible mark on us. We never spoke of that night, and we avoided the outskirts of town like the plague. But sometimes, in the quiet of the night, when the world is still and the shadows grow long, I still hear the faint whispers calling my name, reminding me that some horrors can never be truly forgotten.